A 10-second kiss cam at a Coldplay show just detonated into a divorce. HR exec Kristin Cabot has filed to end her marriage to rum mayor Andrew Cabot. What started as a stadium meme spiraled into resignations, old money optics, and a brutal line from an ex-wife she doesn't seem like wife material, per reports. Tonight we trace how one viral moment leapt from Jumbotron to courtroom, and why the stakes now stretch far beyond a trending clip. And the wildest twist isn't the kiss, it's what insiders say happened next. The moment looked harmless. A quick pan across the crowd, a smiling couple on the big screen, and a stadium roaring to a Coldplay chorus. Then the camera lingered. She stiffened. He shrank in his seat. And in 10 seconds, a private situation became a public storyline, with 50,000 witnesses and millions more on standby. By sunrise, the internet had done what it does best: slow the frame down and speed the drama up. Users clipped the moment, rewound the facial expressions, and stitched theories like detectives with a deadline. Names surfaced, then job titles: Kristin Cabot, the HR chief; Andy Byron, the CEO, same company; high positions, extremely bad optics. The clip wasn't just viral, it was combustible, because it wasn't two random fans. It was the top of the org chart, under stadium lights. That night's on-stage banter only fed the fire. A joking line about being very shy or something else was enough to nudge a rumor into a narrative. Suddenly, every micro gesture was a confession. The glance, the shoulder shift, the delayed smile that didn't quite land. 10 seconds of body language turned into 1,000 posts of analysis, and each post sharpened the stakes. Context made it bigger. Astronomer wasn't a local startup, it was a high-valuation player. She oversaw people, policy, and culture. He ran the show. Power dynamics weren't a subplot, they were the plot. The internet didn't need a press release to ask the obvious. If this is what made the Jumbotron, what didn't? In that gap between what everyone saw and what no one knew, speculation grew like wildfire. But the algorithm wasn't the only engine here. Real life moved, too. Photos ricocheted across feeds, comment sections, split into camps. Some people called it a private matter, caught in a very public net. Others called it a betrayal live stream to a soundtrack. Either way, the narrative hardened. A stadium moment had crossed into workplace territory, and that's where the fallout always gets expensive. The clip kept playing, but the pressure shifted. The question wasn't, did they kiss? The question became, what does the company do now? Viewers wanted more footage. Boards want answers. HR policy, conflict of interest, leadership judgment. Suddenly those weren't buzzwords. They were liabilities. A meme had migrated from For You pages to conference rooms, and the clock on no comment was ticking. And here's the part people missed while the views soared. Virality sets the stage, but governance writes the script. Stadium noise fades. Slack threads don't. When executives are the headline, the brand is the hostage. That's why the real explosion didn't happen online. It hit the boardroom next. The meme didn't stay a meme. It walked into work on Monday. HR huddles, counsel on speed dial, the kind of meetings where everyone speaks softly and every word might end up in discovery. Policy wasn't abstract anymore. It had names, titles, and a timestamp. First move, stabilize the brand. The board pressed the big boring buttons that save companies process, documentation, independence. The CEO was placed on leave. The interim plan slid into place. 3 days later, the leave became a resignation. No firework, just a carefully worded statement in an empty corner office that still smelled like espresso. For the people inside, the shift was instant. Calendars reshuffled, projects rehomed. Those two org chart boxes, CEO and HR, carry the company's oxygen. If one falters, everyone holds their breath. If both wobble, the air gets thin. Employees didn't need a town hall to understand the stakes. They could feel it in the hallways, the inbox, the way meetings started right on time. Then came the second headline. Kristin Cabot stepped away too. The optics wrote themselves leader and head of people, both out within days of a viral clip. Not accusations, not verdicts, consequences. In a high-growth company, credibility is currency, and once the market senses a crack, leadership moves fast to seal it. The message was simple: governance first. The power dynamic was the lightning rod. A CEO, an HR chief. That pairing hits every nerve in corporate culture. Compliance purists asked how policies would be enforced when the enforcers are part of the story. Cynics said this is exactly why rules exist on paper, to be waived only when the wind changes. Realists focused on continuity, keep customers calm, keep investors briefed, keep the product shipping. In the background, the brand triage continued. Vendor calls, key accounts reassured. Internal FAQs drafted in neutral tones that said everything without saying much. The company didn't need to argue on the internet. It needed to make payroll, ship features, and prove that leadership changes wouldn't break the roadmap. Crisis PR does punctuation, operations write the paragraph. And that's the quiet truth of public scandals. The internet roars, but institutions whisper. Titles change. Signatures rotate. Policies get a fresh read. And the org swallows hard and keeps moving. By the time the clip passed its peak, the company had already rebalanced itself, at least on paper. Careers collapsed fast. At home, the aftershocks were worse. Old money doesn't shout, it signals and shout. It signals, and in New England, few signals are louder than a storied surname, a coastal address, and a legacy business older than most maps on the office wall. That's the world Andrew Cabot moves in. Heritage, handshakes, and a last name people recognize without asking why. It's not just wealth, it's a playbook. Discretion is the headline. Appearances are the policy. He runs rum with a pedigree, family company, history baked in, the kind of brand that sells a story before it sells a bottle. The persona matches the product, classic lines, quiet confidence, nothing messy on the label. In that universe, scandal isn't just inconvenient. It's off-code. You don't fight it online, you absorb it, redirect it, pretend it's weather you planned for, and carry on. At home, the optics were curated too. A stately New Englander near the water. White trim, old trees, the kind of neighborhood where curtains move but nobody talks. It's a backdrop meant for stability. Fundraisers on the lawn. Holiday lights done by professionals. A driveway that says everything is under control. The point wasn't flash, it was permanent. That's why the stadium clip didn't just blow up careers. It cracked a facade. Old money hates public narratives. It didn't author. Suddenly the last name wasn't a shield. It was a spotlight. The internet didn't care about lineage, and the algorithm doesn't have a Brahmin filter. The story had already jumped the fence. Inside those circles, damage control reads like etiquette. Fewer statements, tedier sentences, a tone that says, "This does not concern you," even when it very much does. But reputation isn't a private asset anymore. It's a feed, a thread, a trend you can't invite to leave. And when the brand of your life is tradition, chaos looks louder. That tension, legacy versus virality, set the table for what came next. Because there's a point where managing perception stops working, and you have to formalize the fallout. Then came the headline that turned whispers into paperwork. Paper replaces rumor. A petition lands on a clerk's desk in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the story that started on a stadium screen now speaks in the quiet language of law. Headings, case numbers, boxes checked. Words like irretrievable breakdown, cooling the heat of a million comments. It isn't dramatic, it's decisive. Reports say Kristin Cabot filed to dissolve the marriage less than a month after the kiss cam moment. The timing mattered, not because it proved anything about intent, but because it turned a meme into a milestone, a timeline you can, a step that says whatever we were pretending to manage privately is now in the open, and there are forms for that. No podium, no joint statement, just the machinery of a New England courthouse moving at its own speed. Attorneys signal, then retreat. filing surface, then go quiet again. That's how these things go. Public enough to become search results, private enough that the real negotiations happen out of view. The stakes aren't just emotional, they're tangible. A recently purchased coastal home, the kind that signals stability and success. Assets, titles, valuations, and the shadow math of lifestyle. Old money image meets line item reality. You can spin headlines. You can't spin ledgers. Divorce is where reputation meets receipts. Inside that process, leverage matters. Who wants what? Who blinks? Who needs the noise to stop first? There are temporary orders, disclosures, deadlines that don't care about trending sounds. The internet sprints, the docket jogs, and every new page adds weight that clicks can't lift. For the people involved, the filing does something the internet never does. It narrows the story. It stops being theory and becomes arithmetic. What's marital? What's separate? What's fair enough to sign today, even if no one feels it tomorrow? That's the quiet cruelty of paperwork. It demands answers when hearts still want questions. And yet, one thing stayed constant: silence from the principals. No comment from her, no speech from him, just the record and the void where explanations usually go to die. In scandals like this, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. You don't argue with a petition, you respond to it. But the vacuum didn't last, because while the parties kept their distance from the microphones, another voice stepped forward. Older history, sharper edges, zero patience for etiquette. And that's when an ex-wife's words cut through the legalese like a headline written in permanent ink. The next voice didn't come from lawyers, it came from history. Andrew Cabot's ex-wife stepped into the frame, and her words sliced cleaner than any timeline. In interviews reported by the press, Julia Cabot didn't hedge. She called him a bad bet as a partner. Then came the line that detonated across feeds about Kristin. She doesn't seem like wife material, not evidence. An opinion sharp, personal, unforgettable. Why did it hit so hard? Because it wasn't a blogger guessing from the bleachers. It was someone who'd lived inside the life everyone was suddenly dissecting. Old photos, shared addresses, holidays you can't scrub from memory. She had standing, and the internet loves a witness with scars. She framed Andrew as the kind of man who shrugs off fallout and keeps the cufflinks straight. She framed Kristin as a runner toward heat, not away from it. Fair or not, the narrative gained teeth. The backdrop made it louder. In one telling, Andrew was the classic New England archetype: lineage, legacy, a quiet code that treats scandal like weather. In another, Julia painted him as a man who cares most about money and image, brittle under public embarrassment but not necessarily broken by it. Nothing in those lines settles a court case, but everything in them steers perception, and perception is the oxygen of modern scandal. Kristin didn't answer. Andrew didn't post. Silence met the quotes and let them echo. That's the trick with well-placed commentary. It fills a vacuum and hardens into the story before anyone on the inside decides to speak. Comment sections didn't wait for filing. They crowned villains, drafted arcs, and clipped those two phrases into captions that traveled faster than any official update. But here's the uncomfortable part. Commentary can be compelling and incomplete at the same time. The ex-wife's words carried emotion, context, and bite, but not proof. They were her take, reported by media, not a verdict. The legal process kept moving at its careful pace, unaffected by likes, unbothered by trending sounds. The internet wanted a morality play. The docket wanted numbers, dates, and signatures. Even so, the quotes did their work. They gave the story a face and a tone. They tilted empathy. They hardened suspicions. And once a narrative catches that kind of traction, it drags everything with it. Brands, families, even bystanders who never asked to be extras in a stadium-sized plot twist. But the online machine wasn't done. Because after the quotes came the receipts, the screenshots, the claims and counters that blurred the line between reporting and rumor, and that's where facts and fiction started colliding at full speed. Screenshots started flying like confetti. Receipts became religion. Threads swore they had the inside track, late-night messages counted, motivations decoded, timelines nailed to the minute. It felt definitive because screenshots always do, but most of it lived in the shadows where drama thrives and proof gets thin. Here's the split that actually matters. Verified the stadium moment exists. The roles were real. The CEO stepped down after leave, and the divorce petition is on file with the court. Dates, documents, statements, clean, checkable, boring in the way truth often is. Unverified, the breathless claims about dozens of messages in a single night. Sources swearing there were investigations beyond what's been publicly acknowledged. And play-by-play tales from unnamed insiders who somehow watched everything from everywhere. Those might be true, half-true, or theater, without receipts that stand up outside a feed. They're just noise with the storyline. One widely shared apology letter surged, complete with letterhead and a dramatic signature. At first glance, it looked perfect. Then the seams showed. Fonts didn't match known templates. Timestamps drifted. The phrasing read like fan fiction polished for virality, not for corporate counsel. Basic forensics and a little patience were enough to cool it. That's the cycle now. A flashy post spikes, the internet coronates it as canon, and by the time the corrections arrive, the narrative has already set. The leaked DMs weren't any better. Cropped edges, inconsistent UI, metadata that changed from share to share. One version blurred names, another magically unblurred the same field. That's not transparency. That's theater lighting. And meanwhile, the only things that truly reshape lives, employment decisions, docket entries, signed agreements, moved along off camera, as they always do. None of this means the rumors are impossible. It means they're unproven. There's a difference. In a story this combustible, certainty is currency, and we're not spending what we can't back. What we can back is already heavy enough. 2 top leaders out, a marriage moving to paperwork, a brand repairing trust while the internet keeps score. If you're keeping your own scoreboard, use the right stats. Not virality, but verifiability. Not dramatic paragraphs pasted on letterhead, but filings with numbers and names. Not the loudest thread, but the document that survives a second read. And a third question. That's how you separate heat from light without killing the pace. Because the pace isn't the problem. The stakes are reputations, assets, families, and a company that still has to ship on Monday. Those are real. The rumor mill can spin all night, but the consequences clock in at 9 a.m. and that's where we're heading next. What actually hangs in the balance, now that the outrage cycle has cooled and the paperwork has begun? The outrage cooled, the stakes didn't. What began as a viral moment is now a long game with real costs. Personal, legal, professional, and each lane moves on a different clock. The internet wants finales, real-life deals and consequence. Personally, reputation is the currency and privacy is the spend. Friends choose sides, family group chats go quiet. Every social post becomes a Rorschach test. Silence protects the case but taxes the soul. And the algorithm never forgets. You can delete a profile picture. You can't delete a narrative. Legally, the divorce is the spine of the story. Disclosures, valuations, the sober math of property and precedent. There's no soundtrack to discovery, just forms, deadlines, and decisions about what's marital, what's separate, and what's simply not worth the fight. Timing matters, leverage matters, and so does stamina. Courtrooms reward patience. The feed rewards heat. Professionally, both have to rebuild from the edges and titles disappeared. Networks didn't. Some doors closed because brands hate mess. Others open because some industries love a comeback. Either way, the first step isn't a splashy announcement. It's credibility, quiet work, careful allies, proof over posture. In leadership, trust is issued in teaspoons and revoked by the gallon. For the company they left, the task is dull and vital. Stabilize, ship product, keep customers, Reassure partners. Crisis PR buys time. Execution restores belief. Inside, people relearn where decisions live. Outside, stakeholders watch for boring signals. Steady releases, measured updates. No drama. If calm has a KPI, it's consistency. Image still matters, especially in old money orbit. Appearances once guarded the house. Now they guard the headline. The question isn't who's right so much as who looks reliable. That's the harsh truth of public scandal. Optics don't decide the facts, but they often decide the future invitations.
What hangs in the balance now isn't just a verdict or a settlement, it's trajectory. Do they choose retreat or reinvention? Do they fight every rumor or starve it? Do they chase attention or build in silence until results speak? Each choice writes a different third act.
Because in the end, this story stops being about a clip and starts being about control. Who regains it, who loses it, and who learns to operate without it. The outrage cycle is over, the outcome cycle has begun, and the lesson that outlives the meme, that's next. A stadium screen made the moment loud, paperwork made it real. Careers shifted, a marriage moved to filings, and an old name image met an always-on internet. That's the arc, from applause to aftermath. The lesson isn't subtle. Virality writes the cold open, institutions write the plot. A meme can bruise you in hours. Governance decides what actually breaks. Screenshots travel fast. Signatures travel farther. Power dynamics weren't background. They were the story. When the CEO and the head of people become the headline, trust becomes collateral. Brands crave stability. Audiences crave spectacle. In the middle, human beings try to breathe. What turned a clip into a reckoning wasn't just the rumor mill. It was accountability with dates and ink. Titles changed. Doors closed. New ones will open. Slowly, quietly, for those who rebuild instead of perform. Comebacks aren't declared. They're earned. For everyone watching, there's a mirror here. We judge in seconds what takes months to resolve. We turn it into receipts and quotes into verdicts. But real outcomes aren't crowdsourced. They're measured in disclosures, decisions, and the kind of silence that hurts but helps. So remember this the next time a 10-second video tries to define a life. The internet archives the moment, not the context. It keeps the picture. It loses the air around it. You don't control the first frame. You do control the next chapter. Maybe that's the point. Narratives stick, but they're not permanent. You can't erase the clip. You can outgrow it. You can trade noise for proof, heat for patience, and spectacle for substance until the story bends. And that leaves us with a question bigger than this case. When a camera finds you at the worst possible time, do you let the clip decide or do you write the rest? Your answer isn't a post, it's a pattern. That's where we leave it, a 10-second clip that rewired careers, cracked a marriage, and reminded everyone that the internet writes fast while real life moves slow. We've separated noise from notes, rumor from record, and watched how power, perception, and paperwork collide when the spotlight refuses to blink. If there's a lesson here, it's simple. You don't get to choose the moment that finds you, but you do choose the pattern that follows. So what do you think? Is this a hard reset or the first chapter of a comeback? Drop your take below. I want the sharpest theories, the wildest angles, and the questions we didn't ask. If this ride kept you hooked, tap follow and stick around. The next headline is already loaded.